and happy Wellness Wednesday, everyone. Welcome to another exciting episode of the IDCA Wellness for Tech podcast, where we focus on empowering current and emerging technology leaders and those inspired by technology to lead well from within. My name is Jothi Dugar, as you know, the Chaos Guru, and I'm so proud and excited to be your host for this unique and truly revolutionary podcast, a first of its kind. As you know, I'm a C-suite IT leader and executive myself, having been in the industry for several decades. I understand all too well how chaotic, stressful, and high pressure the technology field can be. So I'm super excited today to bring in an inspirational leader in the field of wellness and holistic health, Brittany Loney. Brittany is the director and creator of the ECHO program at Core One, which stands for Elite Cognition and Human Optimization Program. She has over 18 years of experience training high performers from an array of communities like soldiers, Olympic athletes, non-governmental organizations, and C-suite executives. So for the past 12 years or so, Brittany has been developing and implementing cognitive training programs within the national security and government sectors. She's also helped develop and taught curriculums for NATO's Inaugural Mental Performance and Resiliency course. So I am so excited to have Brittany on the show today. Welcome, Brittany.
It is a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. Well, let's jump right in. I know the audience is dying to hear lots of goodness coming from you today, and so am I. So one of my first questions for you is, in your role, it seems like you've done a lot for a variety of different groups of people, including executives. How do you foster and empower staff within organizations to prioritize their health and wellness over all else?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And early on in my career, my approach was very different than it is today. Today, I try to align with the person's values or the organizational values that are already in place. Early in my career, I tried to instill my own values upon others, and I found that did not work. I may value health and performance, but that's not everybody's value system. So I found out what was important to that person or organization, what purpose they saw their organization serving or themselves, their mission and their goals. And then I tried to attach, how does health and wellness impact your ability to live truly who you are in the best way possible, as consistently as possible. So it really was meeting them where they are versus trying to force an agenda, which was, again, early in my career.
Wow, that is a great point. Can you maybe shed some more light on anything that you did to, how did you find out what their core values were? Is there a process that you followed, or was it just basic discussions? And because I found that in my personal life, sometimes people might not have a clear understanding on what their true core values are. So I'd be interested to see how you can bring that out of someone.
You can often see what people value by listening to what they rant about and what upsets them. And it's not just listening to the maybe singular event, it's what's underneath that. Why? So let's say traffic, for example, which is a simple example, but a lot of people rant about traffic. And for different reasons, for different value systems. Some rant about it because of efficiency. Some rant about it because people aren't following the rules. And when you ask them why it bothers them, or what it is about that experience that is really eating away at them, I found that you can distill a lot of values from rants. Also within the military population, and that's really where I've done a lot of my time, I realized it was all about service to others, service to country, and self was last on that list, and health and wellness felt selfish to them. And it was looking at the military value system, and many organizations, they'll have their values on the wall, and some follow them, some don't. But within the military itself, I stopped trying to attack it from a point of this will help you as an individual. It's if you don't do this, what could end up happening to your team because you're not at your best. So that's one method I used within the military, but that was kind of apparent. Maybe not early in my career it was apparent, but it's really stepping back and asking the person, maybe, why are you in the career that you are? What made you choose that? If you didn't have to work for a living, what would you be doing? Truly, what would they be doing? The first answer they'll give is usually a joke, like, yeah, I'd be out in the mountains and never come back. And really, when they start to think about that, they're like, no, that will kind of get boring. So then you start to get at, well, what would you do if money was really not part of the equation? And then I think you start getting at what's really important to them. And then you start to steer the conversation of how does health and wellness affect what is really important? And if it's family and kids, then you can talk about longevity and being there, and not just being there in body, but also being able to have quality while you're actually with them.
So do you feel like values can change over time? And also, can you have different values for different aspects of your life? So let's say you brought up health, children and families and maybe relationships. Can you have different values for that aspect of your life versus different values for, let's say, your career or maybe other parts of your life? Or do you have to have one set of values that transcend across all aspects, do you feel?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that people tend to have a value system that gets expressed differently in different environments. So it might look differently, but I don't think the entire value system changes. I do think that's probably pretty consistent. I think it's the expression of the value. And then also, Aristotle talked a lot about values, and that there's overexpression and underexpression. It's about the mean. It's not with integrity. Some people think, well, yeah, more is always better. Well, if more is always better, let's say honesty, would you tell your spouse that the food was awful that they just cooked? And so there isn't an overexpression even of some of the values we think that you could never have enough of. So I think sometimes it could come out differently, and you might see a value overexpressed or underexpressed in one environment, but I think the value system still remains consistent.
Got it. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And I think when you talked about the overexpression of some values, I think about someone values love, but there could be too much love. Someone, especially if like a clingy partner, is always showing love, and you're like, okay, I get it. I love you too, but I kind of also need my own space sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, great point. What efforts? I know you have your own organization. And I know you do a lot of work with the military and executives and other communities as well. How can an organization help their employees with their own well-being? And what have you found to be the most effective techniques or efforts?
I think it's interweaving it as a part of the institution, not a supplementary extra thing that people have to seek out informally on their own. I think and this is in my experience, when I've seen our programs be most successful, it's when the organization looks at, from hiring all the way through offboarding somebody, how do we use a program like ours within that entire process? And wellness is a big part of our program. It's the foundation that we build upon. So I think it's looking at how do you institutionalize it from day one, even before they have entered the door as an employee. Maybe they're just a job candidate at that point in time. And then I also think the leadership, I've seen active support and I've seen passive support. And active support is the only way for it to be successful. It's not, here's what I'm going to say, wellness is important, balance is important, but everything you see me do is the antithesis of that. It's actually living what you're saying as a leader. If you say balance is important, you have to show that in some sort of way. And balance is a dynamic word as well. So my balance is not someone else's balance. We all have a different work-life balance we want in our lives. And it's also dynamic in nature. So I do think it's living it as a leader. It's also institutionalizing it appropriately. And then you'll see it become part of the common fabric of the culture. And I've been able to see that across working a decade with one organization, starting out from, it was just work, work, work all the time. And the mission was always first, and it still remained first, but there was a better way to achieve the mission. It wasn't just work harder, work harder. It's let's think and work smarter. And I think that's where wellness comes in, is work smarter, not necessarily always harder. There will be weeks and months where you'll have a sprint and it will be harder, but that will be met with a balance and an undulation of stress over time. And I do think you have to measure it in some sort of way.
That's a great point that you made, of your balance might look different than somebody else's balance. So, you getting up in the middle of the night to send emails, maybe it's because you took a few hours off in the afternoon to go take care of your kids and you have a maximum, more of a flexible schedule than the other person. But to them, it might look like, oh, you started at 8 o'clock and you're now going through the middle of the night and sending emails. They might not really understand, like, oh, no, that's not actually what you did. We face that in the government a lot, because there's different types of schedules, but the norm is 9 to 5, or whatever your 8.5 hours is. But if you're on something like a flexible schedule, that some people aren't even aware that you could get on, maybe you're doing 9 to 2, and then you're taking 2 to 4 to pick up your kids from the bus stop and get them settled in, and then you start work again. So you're sending emails at 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night. But that's still part of your balance, which somebody else might not understand. So you made a great point. And as a leader, it sounds like you need to, it's kind of your responsibility to let your staff know, like, hey, this is my schedule, and this is balance for me, but that your idea of balance might be different, and that's okay. And I think that even to add on to that, I felt like everybody's ability to handle a certain amount of stress and chaos is also different. And their strength, the amount of strength and resiliency is also different. So I might be able to handle, chaos in different aspects of my life and be able to handle it well, because maybe it's something that I've gotten used to, or I can manage it. But if someone else might just have one thing happen to them, because I find you could go into somewhat of a judgment zone sometimes, like, well, it doesn't sound like it's that big of a deal. Why is this person not able to handle it? But being able to have that compassion and empathy, you're like, well, that's their chaos level, not yours.
Yes, that is so true. And some people thrive in a chaotic environment. Like me, I prefer that. Because I get bored easily. And it's not to say that that's better than someone else who doesn't get bored easy or doesn't like as much of a dynamic environment. But you hit on the communication piece. I think that's critical, because leaders sometimes assume that people know that, oh yeah, they know I take my kids or pick them up from 2 to 4 and then I hop back on. Well, no, they might not know that. Like for me, I'm an early bird, so I will often send emails 4:35 in the morning, but I like that. And I do like a midday break, and then I'll kind of resurge. And I do think it's really critical that leaders communicate that, but because I think on the receiving end, when we see that time it was sent, we think that person has worked straight through. And even if they have, that doesn't mean it was productive either. I think there's a common misconception that doing is progressing. And I've shared this example before with military personnel. They do something called land navigation. And that's where they're out finding points, using grid coordinates, using their compass, walking various paces and that type of thing. So oftentimes they'll get lost in their land navigation. And the thing you're meant to do when you get lost is to stop and reorient to determine where you need to go. Well, most people keep moving because they think if I'm moving, I'm progressing. And I think that's a really great analogy for productivity. We think if we're doing, we're progressing. But you could be doing all the things that really don't matter. Yes, you were busy for 12, 14, 16, 18 hours in that day. But how well were you actually progressing, and at what rate were you progressing? So I think it's really critical to understand the difference between doing and progressing. And the last point that you made me think of on that was impressions. I have seen this happen so much in organizations where people will stay in the office or stay online for the impression versus that they are actually there to have something to do and progress. So I think it's important to reflect ourselves and ask ourselves, am I here right now for the impression? Or am I here right now because I'm actually being extremely productive on really important goals? And I do think that is key. I will tell you, I've fallen in that impression realm myself, especially in organizations that value do all the time. And I found myself, that's a dangerous area for me because I will just keep working all night long. But I've had to catch myself, no, you're actually here for impression. And impression is important, and we need to acknowledge that. And in an organization, if people are there for impression, a leader needs to reflect on why is the impression such that they feel they need to do that and try to course correct.
There are so many great points in this. I could go on and on. I mean, one thing that came to mind is, I had a period of time where I do a lot of different things, about 20 different things. And I had to really, and then I was getting burnt out and stressed myself. And I really had to pause, like you said, and just stop and really try to figure like, well, why am I doing all of these things? Is it for that impression that, oh, look, she does all of these amazing things? Or am I getting fulfilled, or is this part of my passion, my mission, my purpose, where I feel fulfilled doing it? And I had to cut down on lots of things where I felt like, oh, well, this just looked great to do it, but I don't really feel much energy coming back to me when I do it. So I cut all of those things out. So now I still do about 10 different things, but it's everything that I feel enjoyment and fulfilled doing. Some of them are paid, some of them are unpaid. Like this podcast. I mean, I love speaking with people like yourself, learning and growing and expanding. I don't get paid for this, but it's fine because I feel like this is part of my passion. It is part of my mission, and I feel fulfilled afterwards. And then the other point that you brought up about being versus doing, somebody told me once, we are human beings. We're not human doings. And a lot of times we don't allow ourselves to just be and enjoy just being in a state of happiness or joy. We're always kind of reaching for that next thing, the next thing, the next thing. And a lot of times if we, I'm sure you've had these experiences as well, where you keep thinking, oh, when I get this, I'm going to be so happy. But then one day when you end up getting it, I'm like, okay, it feels good, but it's not as happy as what I thought I was going to feel. So just kind of enjoying the present moment. And another analogy that I would share with the audience is the NASCAR analogy, where, you're racing around the track, or, round and round and round. Sometimes it feels like they're just going round and round. They're not really going anywhere, but it's like the process of it's enjoying the process, but also they come to a complete stop somewhere along that process and get refueled and, take a quick break, make sure everything is in check. And then they go even faster, or they're more effective for the rest of the time. So sometimes as human beings, I think we forget to just pause, reflect on how things are going, and then make changes as needed, or feel like, okay, I am going in the right direction, and keep going that way.
Yeah, I love that analogy. And as you were speaking about the attainment of that next thing, we always have that next thing as the hedonic treadmill. It's seeking that next thing, and that next thing will never fulfill us. It's who we are each and every day and how we live our values and purpose that's going to be fulfilling, not chasing one achievement after another that may not even be fulfilling to what you see for your life purpose. So I really love that you brought that up. And it kind of, all this productivity aspect gets encapsulated in, don't be magnificent at doing insignificant things. Because I think that happens so often. I was listening to a book yesterday, and they kept talking about being really, really good at doing irrelevant things. And it's really questioning, is what I'm doing leading to my number one or two end states, or the organization's mission and top priorities?
That's great. Wow. So we spent the last 10 minutes talking about one question, which is great.
Sorry.
No worries. Like we have so many other questions that I would love to get your thoughts on. I ask this for every guest because I am guessing something or some things or some experiences in your life have shaped you into who you are today. This, brilliant, amazing person that you are. What has there been a time where you might have felt awakened to a new reality that's changed the way you do things or just changed the way you look at life?
Yes. And it's always the hard situations, the things that I wouldn't ask for to happen again. And one of those, it was when I was in undergrad, I got my fourth major head injury. I had a lot of other little dings along the way, but this one was the fourth one that gave me brain damage on CAT scans. And it also ended my basketball career, my senior year of undergrad. And with it came a lot of difficulties cognitively and emotionally. It ended up impacting the prefrontal cortex, which is essentially the part of the brain that makes us human and allows us to decide and to reflect and all the things we as humans can do that animals can't. And with that, I had some anterograde amnesia, which is the inability to form new memories. So I ended up having to study all night, then go to class, take the test. I couldn't sleep between tests just because I would lose that memory. So it was the only way to get through undergrad without having a delay. And then I had emotional control issues. I put my hand through so many walls. If I laughed, I couldn't stop laughing. If I cried, I couldn't stop crying. So I became a shell of an emotion. Like I didn't want to feel any emotion, good or bad. You would think, oh, wow, it must be great to laugh and not be able to stop. No, it actually really wasn't great. So I would just not feel anything. And that caused a lot of difficulty in my life. And I changed the entire trajectory of my life. I was studying to be a defense attorney. That's all I ever wanted to be since I was a child. And then I went to see a counselor and he helped me a lot by saying, hey, try this mental training aspect. You might really like it. And I told him, no, that's for people who can't physically do it. And he goes, well, guess what? You can't physically do this anymore. It's like, well, touche. I'll go check it out. And fell in love with the field of mental training and switched everything, went to grad school, and kind of the rest is history on how my life really profoundly changed. And I found something that filled the void that basketball had left. It really was all my identity, and it left such a void. And I wanted to find something I was as obsessive about as I was basketball, and I found it. Like, I would not choose to do anything else in my life if someone offered me millions and millions of dollars. Like, this is what I want to be doing. So I'm incredibly lucky for that situation. And then there's been others along the way that have caused me to go from the first mountain, which is that hedonic treadmill, the achievement orientation. I still tend to have that in me because it was so embedded, to the second mountain of who do I want to be by the end of my life, and really work on that piece of things. And that kind of came through helping my brother through addiction. And he, struggled his entire life with addiction. And then it got really bad for a few years. It was extremely hard on him, his family, myself as his sister. And going through, there was a patch of 2 years that was extremely difficult. And in that, I reflected and didn't like how I handled it. And I was also trying to face the reality of I could lose my brother to this addiction. And I wasn't prepared for that. So what I started doing is preparing myself to handle struggle better, not just for him, but for myself, for my family, so I could show up as my best self and be there for them. So him going through that experience helped me as an adult mature and realize struggle is part of life. You will continue to face it. Do not fight it. Just learn to be better. And that's where I committed to the philosophy of Stoicism. I also look at a lot of Eastern philosophy and just a really integrated view. And that forged me into, I'm going to be this human being and not this human doer. And I want to show up really well for those I care about. And the last kind of piece was more recent. My mother had just gone through this year. She was in the hospital for about a month out of a 2-month span. And I thought I was going to lose her. And that showed me that what I had done to prepare for my brother's death, and he did not die, thankfully, kind of give you that end there. He's in recovery right now, and
So
I'm
glad to
so
hear
proud
that.
of him. Thank you.
Yeah.
But with our mom going through this, it showed me that those preparations worked. And I didn't struggle more than I had to. Was it hard? Yes, it was hard. Life is hard. But I didn't struggle and make it harder than it had to be. And I think that was kind of reinforcement for, okay, you're on the right track, you're doing the right things going forward.
That is so amazing. I think all of us that have gone through moments of crisis like that, where you don't know what the next step is, you don't know, if it's a life and death type of situation, you don't know if you're going to make it the next moment. And then, in your case, your whole future was in your hands. And, I can't imagine being in a profession where it's okay to just keep laughing. Right. I get in trouble a lot because I laugh a lot. And, I've had bosses tell me before, like, you need to just stop laughing so much. I'm like, but okay, well, laughter is the best medicine, right? And yeah, I probably should be laughing too much right now on this podcast, but I spend a lot of my time, and I think you touched on this a little bit, is reflecting on, like, oh, well, should I change who I am then? And should I be, I've done the same thing as you, and like, okay, well, I guess I should just keep a neutral poker face and not have any emotions. I didn't go into I didn't have that situation where I couldn't stop crying, but I am a pretty late person just based on my own experiences in my childhood, where, like, hey, if I can go through that, I can go through anything in life. Let me just take everything with a grain of salt and not take life too seriously. But it doesn't really resonate with everyone, because there are people that are, very serious, and they take everything maybe a little bit more sensitively than I would. And I spent a lot of my time, like, oh, okay, well, maybe I should be more sensitive, or not, or be more serious, and be, or put on this masculine mask. I'm like, okay, I will not laugh at work at all. But you can't do that, because then you're not being authentic. And then you just, I've tried to do that with 3 of my kids. Sometimes I try to put on the stern face, and they just start bust out laughing. I'm like, I am trying to be serious right now. And like, okay, mom, like, why don't you just be you? And like, you know what? That's right. I'm just going to be me, but my rules still apply. I still need you to follow through on them, but yet I don't have to be someone that I'm not, to enforce the structure or the routines that I would like. So I would ask you one question. I found that, sometimes if you're a healer, like an energy healer, we tend to attract people into our life where that need healing, and then we feel that it's our job to help them heal, or to heal them. Now, do you find that to be true in your life, where you have learned all of these amazing ways? Do you find that you attract people that actually need that kind of help?
Yeah,
Just naturally.
First, I think everybody needs some type of help and support in life. I mean, we're all human beings, and we are tribal by nature. We need that connection. I would say earlier in my career, I did, and I was looking for that as well. So I think it was reciprocal. I think the older I've gotten, I've realized that we are all going through the struggle, and I'm trying to heal myself as well. So I don't know if I attract that. I just think human beings have gone through a lot. I think everybody has. And there's not one person who, coming in, oh, they need to be fixed. I think it's seeing the strengths that already exist within them, and helping them see that. That's what I found the most later on in my career. Is I'm not trying to fix any deficiencies. I'm trying to unlock strength so someone can see the beauty they have inside, like I can see it. And I think that's where I focused a lot more now is, wow, I wish you could see yourself through someone else's eyes that sees all this potential in you. And then once they can see that, it's so amazing to watch somebody recognize that greatness actually lies within them.
That's a great point. Great point. So tell me, Brittany, so I know every successful person has some sort of ritual that they follow, whether it's the morning or afternoon or evening or even throughout the day. Do you have one that enables you to be successful every day?
Yes, I do. I have a morning and an evening routine or a shutdown routine. And within it, I actually have it right here. It will be hard to see, but I'll kind of walk through. So each morning I fill this out. The columns are the days of the week are along the columns. And then each thing I want to do in my morning is a row. So in the morning, I've got, a couple things I want to do with my spouse. I kind of check those off because I'm really bad at the love aspect. I'm super good at applying things to work and myself, but honestly, where I do struggle is relationships. So I have to build those in, or else if I don't start my day with that, I honestly will probably forget it, and that will suffer in my life. And I also have on here where I identify my personal win. So win stands for what's important now. So for me, it's what is my most important thing I want to do today that's related to me personally. Some projects I have going on personally, myself in general, whatever it might be. And then I have a professional win that I'll write in as well. And that's if anything else happens, this is the one thing that needs to get done. It is the one most important thing. And it's usually not necessarily a critical time urgent thing. It can be, but we can't confuse importance and urgency. Sometimes the critical things are not the most important things in our lives. So I really try to make it something that is aligned with my purpose and the mission and the end states that I've predetermined are critical in my life. So I'll have that professional win. I'll put my deep work items because I try to do deep work first. So this is where I'm trying to create and be in a high state of focus. I'll write those down. And then my shallow work items, this is just reacting and responding to people. I'll write down when I'm going to work out. It's not the same every day because my days are very dynamic. They change so much. But in the morning, I'll figure out, okay, when is this going to happen? And then walking is super important to me as well. I'm very movement oriented, and I'll write down, okay, when am I going to get my walk in? And then I have a mind setting principle where I'll pretty much brainwash myself for the day, and not in a negative way, but I want to ensure my belief systems are effective for the world. And I'll listen to something that helps reiterate a way I want to perceive the world. And then I'll do a LinkedIn post, and that's my morning routine. And I'm very much a guidelines person versus a strict regimented person. And that's probably because I've worked in the military, and the military literally changed me from writing in pen to writing in pencil because everything changed all the time. I never write in pen. But it also allowed me to figure out, okay, how do you do this within a really dynamic environment? So I just had principles I try to hit for the day versus it has to happen at this time, because I've seen when people have that in dynamic and chaotic schedules, if they don't hit it at that time, they tend to just, oh, well, I'll just throw it all away. Nothing's going to happen right today.
Wow, that is the most detailed ritual practices I have ever heard. And I'm going to have to pause this episode while I'm listening to it again to write down everything that you said. That's great. Yeah, that's, I wonder, you touched on a point on writing in pencil versus writing in pen. And that's interesting to me because in the world of cybersecurity technology, things change on a daily basis. And a lot of times I've had to go through the exercise and, okay, I'm going to write down all the 20 things I need to get done today. And the day goes by and I look at my list. I'm like, well, I got 2 out of those 20 done. And I used to feel like a failure before, in my younger days. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, wow, like what did I do in the day? I only got 2 out of these things done. But then I forgot to add on the other 20 things that got piled on my plate that wasn't even on my list. So I actually incorporated a technique for myself these days is to I have a little app that I use on the phone where, there's all these tasks. And then every day, if I can accomplish one of those tasks, okay, I'll check off the box. But then as I do things that I didn't even anticipate I had to do, I would start adding those tasks to my task list and then check those off. Because something in my brain, gets real, and then being able to celebrate those. I'm like, okay, well, I know I literally just added these additional tasks and then I took them off or checked them off immediately. But hey, this kind of helps me feel better about myself. Like, okay, well, I didn't accomplish those 20, I only did 2 out of those 20, but then I accomplished 18 other tasks. So in essence, I got 20 tasks done. It just wasn't the same 20 that I thought I was going to get done.
Yeah, and that's why I have that personal and professional win. It's one thing. I can't put 2 things in that. So it really helps me feel like if a day gets away from me because we have to react, that those things happen, at least I can look, okay, so what was my most important goal today? And usually it will be a small element of it. And some days I'll be able to get more than that done. But at least I would be able to get started on it. Even if it was 5 minutes towards that win for the day, at least I made some sort of progress on something that is important to the end states that really matter.
That's great. I love that acronym WIN. What's important now. I think that's a great tool, but to even teach kids, because they're always like, oh, we're gonna do this on Friday or Saturday or next week, and I'm like, what's important right now? Let's just focus on that. And a lot of times I get distracted. You tell them, go brush your teeth, get ready to go, and then something gets, shiny object over here. Like, okay, what right now? All you gotta do is focus on brushing your teeth. That's it. Like, oh, we don't do anything else. I'm like, for the next 5 minutes, no, just focus on, just get yourself out of the bathroom. So that's great. I'm going to use that tactic all the time. I actually created a tools chart for the kids, and every week I try to teach them a new tool that they could try to incorporate. So this is going next on their list.
Oh, I love that.
So can you tell us about any simple wellness hacks that you can offer that people can do throughout the day to refuel, rejuvenate, and replenish their energy?
Yeah. So finding something that works for everybody is just not possible. So I'm going to give a couple examples because I do think finding your way through the balance of wellness is very much an individual journey. But there are some tried and true things that are extremely effective. So throughout the day, I try to find times where I can get movement and sunlight. And with the environments that I've worked in, I'm sure that probably has happened to many of the people you work with. There were no windows. There was, I went 1 week without seeing the sun because I was in at dark, got out at dark, and I literally never saw the sun. Not once. And obviously I was pretty depressed at the end of that week. So then I started trying to figure out, okay, I need to see the sun. That is what really regulates our circadian rhythm, which is what impacts your sleep and your ability to be productive during the time you actually want to be productive. So oftentimes I will, again, write in my morning routine, okay, here's what I think I'm going to have going on today. Here's when I want to try to get my walk done. And I'll try to do walking meetings as well. I think anytime you can combine movement and sunlight with a meeting, that's going to be so productive, not just for you at work, but you personally. So looking for times you can get some of that in. Also, I'm a huge fan of what's 4-minute Tabatas. Have you ever heard of a Tabata?
Yes.
So I use it to help with my productivity and not just to help me physically, but a 4-minute Tabata, for those who don't know, is 20 seconds of high intensity working out, 10 seconds of rest. And you don't need equipment. You don't need to change your clothes. You don't need to get sweaty. It could be something like running in place, fake jump ropes, air squats, push-ups. And I'll do a 4-minute Tabata if I need a productivity boost. I will just get up near my desk and go and do that. And we've actually done that quite a bit with our military populations. And they really embraced it. They almost got shirts that said 4-minute Tabata on the back. Wow. But it's such an effective tool that will change the neurochemistry of our brain almost immediately. You could not buy a pill on the market. One doesn't exist anyway, but it would be really, really difficult to manufacture something that's effective as a 4-minute Tabata for your brain's ability to perform and be productive. So that's another one that I've instilled throughout my days, especially in the afternoon hours. If you had to think, okay, when should I use this? I will use a 4-minute Tabata usually around that 2 or 3 time frame when I start to feel that circadian dip, which we all have. On weekends or days off, so sometimes it's not always a weekend that someone has off, I often ask someone, what fills your heart and soul? Not go rest and relax, but what fills your heart and soul on a daily basis? And they'll say something like playing with my kids, or talking with my parents who are getting older, or going out for a hike in nature. Whatever it is, try to do that on the days off. Many times there is a response of just wanting to sit and watch TV, and that's fine. I mean, sometimes you need that, but that's not going to fill your heart and soul. You might go into the next day just as tired and worn. So I think that's critical to ongoing wellness, is find those things. It doesn't necessarily have to take your whole day, but what are the things that help do that for you? Social connection as well is another big thing that I think is often left out of wellness and well-being. Introverts, for me, it doesn't work as well, but extroverts tend to really thrive if, they can in some way plan time with loved ones and other people they enjoy being around, because that tends to fill their heart and soul. Nature is another thing. As much as you can, just getting outside in nature. I use yoga quite a bit, even small doses of it, 10 minutes throughout my day. I always think about undulating stress. So if I'm feeling a high sense of stress in my day, that's a cue to me. Do I do a 4-minute Tabata? Do I go for a quick walk? Do I even do a quick run? What do I do to help bring myself back down a little bit so my whole day isn't just building until I'm ready to crash? So that's what I encourage too, is think about undulating your stress through the day.
Those are some great tactics that you can use in a variety of different aspects. It sounds like mind, body, and energy techniques. Something that I teach in my programs is taking bits and pieces, like 5 minutes, 2 minutes, or 3 minutes every hour throughout the day to replenish and refuel your energy, because it's really all about energy management, not really time management. And I have never heard of the 4-minute Tabata, but I'm definitely going to try that out. So I actually had a question on that. So is it that you can choose whatever physical exercise that you want for 20 seconds and you take a break and then do something else for 20 seconds and take a break, or is it a specific type of exercise?
So the key is to do it enough to get your heart rate pretty high in those 20 seconds. And in a work environment, it usually has to be something someone can do in their work clothes. So I often think about that. And if you're going to do a 4-minute Tabata, I would just identify what exercises will I do in this 4 minutes. And you don't have to change it every time. You could say you're going to have push-ups and running in place, and then just keep alternating those for the 4 minutes. Or if you'd like change, you could just do something different each of those 20 seconds, but pre-identify it. It can get kind of hard when you're trying to go that fast, especially in the middle of it, to think of something. So just kind of pre-put it on there, and and it will give you more movement throughout the day too. If you're having a hard time finding when to get your workout in or whatnot, they've actually found that 10 minutes 3 times a day can be just as effective for some physiological parameters as a 30-minute masked block.
Yes, I have learned that myself, which is why I kind of spread. Because one, if you're a working parent and you have a full-time job or you're doing other things as well, it's almost nearly impossible to find that 45 minutes or an hour to go exercise all in one chunk, or meditate or yoga or whatever it is that you want to do, and then be able to sustain or bring that energy back into your normal world of chaos. So I have found that to be true myself, where if I just kind of split up the day and just take 5 minutes every hour or 10 minutes every 2 hours, and do those meditations or yoga or some sort of exercise, or visualization or whatever it is that you think you need at the moment, and spread it out throughout the day. I've noticed that it actually has a more massive impact, because now you're able to sustain that level of energy throughout the day instead of, getting drained throughout the day and then spending that 1 hour at the end of the day doing your mind body energy exercises.
Yeah, and an interesting phenomenon happened with a group that I was working with, and it's more about this cultural, is it okay to get away from your desk? And this group, they were in a very demanding training course. And what we noticed, beginning, not many people smoked. By the end of the course, a lot of people took up smoking, and we kind of asked them about it. Like, we just want to understand, why did this happen? And they said, because it was more socially acceptable to go take a smoke break than it was to just take a break for something else. And I find that extremely fascinating from a sociological perspective. And I think that is probably in society as a whole, is why is that more acceptable than going to do a 4-minute Tabata or a 10-minute walk or whatever that person's thing is? Why would you have to take up smoking to get a break?
That is such a great point. I literally just had this conversation a few weeks ago in an organization where, I was trying to say, well, we should dedicate 15 minutes every day and for people to focus on their wellness and not set up any meetings. It's just 15 minutes. I'm not asking to, change the HR policy and offer people more leave or anything like that. And I got the same kind of response. And from people like, well, if you just call it a smoking break, I'm sure it'll actually be more more understood, because people are like, well, what are you going to do in that 15 minutes to focus on your wellness? What if you just go to Target? I'm like, well, hey, if walking to Target, helps me get that walk in and take my mind off things and I can come back and actually focus better, then why not? Because, I'm pretty sure if you are a smoker, you're not asking for permission to go spend 20 minutes and smoke a cigarette outside, but no
And
one really
nobody
questions that.
questions it either. And then I also had seen this when I first started working with an organization I was with for a decade, that they would say they didn't have time to do certain things, but then everybody went out to lunch for an hour. So I was very confused. I was like, well, okay, well, why can't you do other things during that time? Why is it unacceptable to get a workout in? It's the same hour, but one thing done in that hour, which is not work either way, was more socially acceptable than another thing done in that hour. And this is where I think leaders can start to change what is socially acceptable. If it's socially acceptable to take lunch, why is it not socially acceptable to use that same time in a way that will actually help their productivity after? Because those going to lunch are probably eating a huge lunch, and we know that eating a huge lunch will actually hurt productivity right after for the next 2 or 3 hours. So yeah, it's so interesting to me, but leaders have the power to change some of these impressions.
They really do. They really do. So coming down to our last question, can you tell us any adverse effects on the mind, body, or energy that you've seen from technology, or maybe the overuse of technology?
Posture is actually probably a big one that might not get talked about as often, but when we hunch over, it's affecting everything from our breathing, because we're closing off our diaphragm, so we're not breathing as effectively, which is actually activating a stress response even more. So I think posture. So if you are going to be on technology, try to ensure the posture, hold your phone out here, those type of things. I also have seen people take breaks by using a more motivated form of technology. So let's say your job involves using the computer, and then you take a break to get on LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever else, text somebody. It is the same activity in terms of the brain. You're asking the brain to recover by doing the same thing. It's like asking someone to max out on bench press, which uses the chest, by doing push-ups beforehand. Like, it doesn't make sense in terms of the brain. So I would say, when you're taking your breaks during your day, if you're using technology as part of your job, your breaks should not involve technology. That's probably another big one that I've seen. And then also, it's just this hyper engagement. There is no way, there is no truly work boundaries and setting of that. So oftentimes I think we have to set our own, and that can be extremely difficult. Or I have seen organizations, their leaders actually set some of those boundaries as well. And I think that really helps employees, because if an email is going to come, you're going to respond, because you're almost like trained like a Pavlovian dog. So when it is feasible, and I understand it's not always feasible, but could a leader set some boundaries that help the employees?
Yeah, that I've always found that, leadership is a privilege, and you have the ability to not only change a person's career progression, but also their lives, just by being a role model for them, or just being authentic and being a role model for the wellness. If you're a leader that wants to promote wellness, be the role model for it. And I know for myself, when I started health and wellness programs, which was a first of its kind in a technology organization, the number one feedback I received was that, oh, finally we feel that someone in leadership actually cares about us and not just about the work or the role that we play here. Which really means a lot, because especially I think these days with our adolescent community, they're looking for jobs that actually fulfill their passions and their purpose, not really, well, I just get money doing this job. So they're really looking for a role model, supervisor or boss or leader that they can really connect with, not just someone they work for.
Yeah, and I think companies can gain a competitive advantage by doing that. If that has to be the motivator, look how many people you can attract by having that sort of approach. And I think people get scared that employees will take advantage, and maybe a couple will. But the disservice it's doing of not having a human-centered leadership approach to those who want to do well and want to serve a purpose is enormous. And companies that are going to put humans first, they're going to have a competitive advantage, because the best of the best will want to go work there. And eventually you will see the other companies, I think, get left behind or have to change.
I love that concept of human-centered leadership. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Brittany. I know we could go probably for another 2 hours talking and picking your brain and all the amazing things that you do and all the tips that you have to offer. But unfortunately, we only have 1 hour for this podcast, but we'd love to have you back, and we can go into further detail and all these amazing tips. So before we leave, can you please tell the audience where they can find you if they would like to reach you?
LinkedIn right now is probably the best, most accessible form. So please feel free to search me on LinkedIn, Brittany Loney. There's a brain as the picture. So if you're wondering if you've got the right person, you'll see a black background with a blue brain. And right now I'm standing up a website, elitecognition.com, with a hyphen in between elite and cognition. Is not launched yet, but that will be up soon.
All right, wonderful. And we will definitely have those links on the IDCA website for this podcast, also on the YouTube page. And that's a wrap, folks. Thank you so much for listening. We will have all the links to the podcast as well as Brittany's information. And see you all every third Wednesday of the month to focus on your wellness and lead your life well from within.